All right. Welcome to another data driven podcast. I'm Chris Stetzel, and today we have a couple of special guests, or one host, and then also a special guest. So let me introduce Vinky Supermanian. He's the Senior VP of Product at Reltio. Vinky, how are you?
I'm doing great, Chris. How are you?
Doing well. Welcome back. We also have Tim Hayden. Tim Hayden is the CEO and founder of Brain+Trust. Tim, how are you today?
Hey, doing great, Chris. It's great to be here with you and Vicky. Thanks.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you as well. I'm really excited about this. And today, our topic is around navigating the shifting challenges and opportunities of customer data. And today, I'm going to hand the reins over to Vinky and let him start the discussion. Vinky, go ahead.
Thank you, Chris. I know you normally play the host. I to do that today and hoping to have a great conversation with you, Tim. First of all, maybe why don't you just give us a little bit of a background about yourself and Brain Trust?
Sure. No, I appreciate that, Vicky. No, for the last 20 years, I've owned agencies. I've worked for agencies. I've been marketing or different types of marketing agencies, communications agencies, but then also software companies. Started a few, worked for a few. And at Brain Trust, since 2016, we have been in the world of customer data platforms and data management, helping brands build that single source of truth or that 360 view of customers. And of course, a long list of things that enables, which I'm sure we may talk about.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. So you have a ton of experience in this topic that we are going to talk about today, which is around customer data, customer 360, customer data platforms. Why are we having this conversation today, Tim? We have been at this problem. We've seen companies try to solve their customer data problem for a very long time, probably for over decades. And we're still talking about it. It is a very relevant topic today. So, what, according to you, are still the biggest challenges or the unsolved problems? And the reason why we are still having a conversation about customer data and customer 360 today?
I think there's a couple of ways to look at that. And probably the preeminent one is this use of the term omni-channel to understand that we've had this proliferation of microcasting meaning the fragmentation of the media place, whether that's where we were 15 to 17 years ago with the advent of, on one side, social networks and on the other side, smartphone use. And obviously having multiple mobile apps and multiple ways through the website, through email, through texting, through anything that would happen with social networks. And then, of course, what comes with that is a media marketplace, your ability to aspirationally meet the customer where they are at the right time, the right person. Why are we still having this conversation? It's because there's that which you can't control, and that is that the market is always changing, right?
Mhm.
The market is always moving much faster than many companies can be prepared to stay aligned with it. So there's that as table stakes. And the other side of it is that so many companies still manage all of the customer data they have very disparately. They have it in countless systems. As I know you and I can giggle a little bit about it, they have the same customer who is Bob, Robert, Bobby, that MasterCard and that iPhone and that Wi Fi router IP address that may exist in 17 different divisions, departments, or business units and the systems they use. With that, if a company is trying to keep up or at least stay adjacently abreast of that fragmentation and the speed at which media is changing, they have a whole lot of work to do at home just to
Yeah.
be able to get that view. So it's a requirement right now. And it's been a requirement for years, as you've already said.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think you touched upon a couple of different points, very important points there. I just want to highlight. One is from a customer perspective, the growing expectations, especially with more and more people being digital natives, the expectation of a seamless experience, no matter how I'm interacting with a company, whether it's through phone, chat, website, mobile applications, in person, any of those things, the customer expectations are sky high that the company knows me as a person, knows the context in which I'm having a conversation with an engagement with, right? You mentioned omni-channel. That's the driving force, and it has been a driving force for some time. And on the flip side, you also talked about how companies are struggling with multiple different systems, a growing system landscape, a proliferation of different applications and experiences that they need to manage. You talked about how Rob and Bob or Robert might exist in 17 systems. When we look at the typical enterprise, we are probably looking at 700 systems, right? Where customer data might exist inside the system landscape. So I think both of those are extremely important aspects. And I think that's probably why the topic of customer 360 and how companies need to look at it to solve for scale and for that omnichannel experience is still a very relevant conversation today. So really
Oh,
appreciate you touching on both of those things.
well, you bet, Vicky. And it is all that. And then I think we'd be remiss not to mention what the pandemic by itself, but the speed at which digitization happened during that time frame. Maybe it wasn't all because of the pandemic. It may have been just where priorities and urgencies accelerated in other directions. But when people think about having a 360 view, when they think about having that holistic golden customer record, the reason they must is because it's not just media data and it's not just marketing data anymore, but it is that which involves supply chain, logistics, fulfillment, product fulfillment, and product delivery. All of that. It's a matter of thinking of the customer experience and the business operation much more holistically. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, one of the customers we work with is one of the largest providers of computer peripherals. And they are trying to, or they have moved successfully to a subscription based model for their printers and ink cartridges and other things. And if you look at it from their perspective, for them, a customer 360 is not just about the information about the customer, where this person lives, what that's not enough. They want to understand what kind of products do they own, what kind of subscriptions do they have, what kind of service requests might they have that needs to be addressed, maybe even proactively, right? Even before an issue happens. And you can see that is not just in the B2C space, even on the B2B side, or more and more businesses are moving towards that subscription, the outcome driven businesses, as opposed to you're buying a device from me and it is a very transactional relationship. So I
Yep.
100% agree.
Definitely, definitely. And I think that's you could name any industry where that is the case, right? We do quite a bit of work in retail automotive, right? And as an industry, the car business has probably over the last 20 years has really moved into a very top of funnel transactional business. And it's actually become a dichotomy of operations with the variable operation, which is what most of us are familiar with, the sales side, the showroom floor, the finance and insurance process. But there's also the life of your relationship with the vehicle, the dealer, and over time, what you're doing on the fixed op side, right? Which is repair orders, it's general maintenance, warranty claims, all of that. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about peripherals is more and more businesses. It's not just a matter of having the holistic view of the customer record, but it is the ability to look at the relationship between product, location, employee, customer. All of these things
Yeah.
have correlational and causal relationships. And I'd be interested to see what are your thoughts on that? Because that to me is where we get into very fascinating views of what's working, what's not working, and what needs to be improved or optimized.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things that I would highlight there is the traditional approach of looking at a customer 360 as that narrow slice, or even when I look at some of the customer data platforms out there, looking at just the customer data, even if you were to extend that to the B2B side, right? The organizations and people that companies work with is not sufficient any longer. You need for any company to provide a effective, seamless experience to customers across channels, across different touch points. It's important to understand the full context. So a customer 360 by its definition needs to have the information about the relationship between different entities like customer, their products, locations, and others. And it also needs to understand the behavioral data about customers, right? What are they doing? In fact, one of the ways we look at it, Tim, and I would like to hear your thoughts on this is the customer 360 need to definitely start with the who. Who is the customer or the party or the entity that you're interacting with, whether it's an organization or a person. It also needs to have the what, which looks a little bit into the rearview mirror into what kind of activities has this customer done with us. but it needs to also extend a little bit into the future, as in what actions can it then drive? Because if it is just an analytical view of things that has happened in the past and not driving actions from there into the future, like things like what is the next action that I need to take? We talk about next best action kind of things in the context of omnichannel engagement.
Right.
But I would argue that needs to be all of those pieces, the who, the what has happened in the past, what needs to happen now. All of those aspects need to come together to make Customer 360 a worthwhile investment for any company.
Totally. I think, and we can think about that in two respects. One is the velocity and the speed at which business takes place today, right? Is your ability to make faster decisions to the point you just made about next best action, right? If the larger the organization is, the more patterns you're going to be able to recognize over time to be able to understand the customer who did A, visited B, and bought C, and another group or cohort who has either visited B and done A, right?
Mhm.
To automatically put C in front of them, to automatically, in the case of some brands, just to send it to their house
Right.
or to know when they pull up to pick something up, whether that's said they're coming visiting a retail location or they're doing curbside delivery, just adding a little extra something to their bag because people who bought the things that they have in their bag also bought this one thing that they just didn't happen to buy. We're going to give it to them anyway. Um,
Right.
I think that's years ago, people would have called that surprise and delight. And it just would have been the hunch or that which was observational. Today, we have the ability through technologies such as customer data platforms and master data management that can work in tandem with each other or sometimes by themselves to deliver an insight to put you in a position to do that, really to really wow the customer, and better than that, put you in a position to be much more accurate with your forecasting, much more accurate with your planning, which I think are not always the same thing.
Right. Yeah. So I think we touched upon a few very important points in the conversation so far, focusing on why this is important for companies to look at and different aspects they need to consider. Let's get a little bit more specific, Tim, about the data aspects, right? Uh,
Sure.
what role does data quality and trust play in making customer data actionable? What is your experience? What has your experience been in that space?
When you go through the implementation of a platform on the front end, before you even start to use it, if we're talking about master data management or we're talking about a customer data platform that is informed or enabled by master data management, in both situations, we have the opportunity to do the simplest things in terms of field matching is to make sure that in in the parent system, which becomes master data management, how are we ensuring that it understands all of the field that exist across a sea of, to the point you made earlier, not just tens but hundreds of other systems that exist in the organization? How we make sure there's fluidity
Mhm.
there as well, for the obvious, to make sure that any user is not confused about data that's uncategorized
Right.
or that wasn't ingested or computed, processed in
Yeah.
the same way everything else was, right? Um, Simple table stakes things like that in terms of getting data ready and then once it's in the system to verify that the data is operational, to make sure that it is coming through the way you want it to.
Right.
It's being displayed, it's being published in the way that you want it to. I think that that's another thing that a lot of folks don't really think about. They don't, I like to say, don't pay too much mind to that because they think these are magic black boxes and they're not, right? We've got to, even with schemaless ETL, even with where we've graduated to this level where we don't have to do data prep necessarily. We don't have to invest in a system that takes weeks to get the data ready. But even without that requirement, we have to not only make sure that the data is of sound quality that we're bringing in, but we also have to ensure that we can verify that it's operational and that
Right.
it does what it needs to do. And that means different things for different systems. It certainly means different things for what you're using as endpoint solutions. But in terms of the MDM, I'll bounce it right back to you. I think data quality means something different to everyone.
Absolutely.
Is there a way you look at that? Is there a way that you specifically are addressing data quality at Realtio?
Absolutely. I'll first let me, even before I answer the LTO part of it and how we help customers, let me give you my point of view as a customer, right? As a consumer. There is a large airlines and I'm part of their loyalty program. I must have signed up in two different times with two different email addresses. But every time there is a marketing campaign they execute, they send me a flyer or something, or a brochure or some marketing material. I get two letters from them to my house address, the same exact address, with one address to Venki Subramanian, the other one address to Venkatesh Subramanian, right? Just
Right.
look at that from an experience point of view for me as a customer. All it tells me is this company does not know me. They don't care enough to know me,
Right.
right? And the translating that into real cost, of course, the quality, the data quality issue is not an expensive one, right? They're not making a huge mistake by sending me two of the marketing materials, but there is a real cost associated with it. They are wasting their money by sending me two exact same pieces of content to my home address. Even if you're looking at a few cents that might cost them to do that, when you look at a large scale, when you look at this company doing business with maybe 60, 70 million customers, those kind of costs can add up. So there is a real cost to data quality here from a customer data perspective. And if you extend that to some other industries where the cost of data quality could be even more significant, just look at and imagine an insurance scenario or a financial services institution that does not get information right and they're sending wrong information to the wrong person. Now you're talking about significantly higher cost of data quality, right? So this is not a nice to have. I would argue that data quality is a must have for you to ensure good customer experience. And in some other cases, when it is compliance related, it is an absolute must have to have that high quality data.
So
So
true.
that is why Reltio as a company, when we work with customers on their customer 360 customer data initiatives, we put that quality at its center in terms
Sure.
of understanding the different input sources, in terms of deduplicating the data, and also in terms of enriching that information from third party sources. And that has to be, for the reasons I explained, for the examples I gave, it has to be front and center.
Definitely.
That brings me to the point about compliance and privacy regulations. Tim, how do privacy regulations like GDPR, CCPA impact on how companies approach their customer data and implement the 360?
I think these laws all pretty much share the same five tenets, right? Which is the consumer or the customer now has a right to see their data, to correct their data, to ask you to pause using it, to ask you to not sell it, and ultimately to say, delete it, to remove it, right? Or the freedom to be forgotten. And to the point you made about two emails, if an anecdotal story I'll just quickly deliver is a certain retailer that shall remain nameless that my wife shops with, every Christmas she gets 7 catalogs. And those 7 catalogs, when you look at the address labels, you can see that some of them have her middle initial, some have an extra space, some have her first name misspelled. And and you and I know because we're in the business, right? If we say, I know what they don't have, I know
Yeah.
what or if they do have, they're not using it. It could be a number of things. Let's not always assume that they haven't invested and attempted to do it, but they lack that. And that puts that retailer in that situation. They're highly susceptible to what happens this June and July of 2024, where there are 13, 14 states that will have their own data privacy laws.
Yeah.
The FTC with data safeguards rule and a merchandise list of other laws or rules. Pardon me. FTC doesn't do laws; they do rules.
Mhm.
The rules in terms of what people can and can't do with their data. And if you're having those kinds of issues that we as the customer can see on the hygiene side of things, if we can see that there's a data hygiene challenge on our end, just wait until there's billboards on the side of the highway that invite us to class action litigation to go after companies that are sloppy with their data management. So compliance is not just something that is anymore a box to check. And it has everything to do with privacy. It has everything to do with security. And to the point I think we both made, It has everything to do with having happy customers.
Absolutely. Chris, I think at this point, I would want to welcome you back into the conversation. We were just getting started there. How do we continue this? How do we continue this conversation?
I think we'll have a part two. We'll get that scheduled as soon as possible. But until then, Tim Venke, what a great conversation. I feel like we just didn't dive in enough, but today that's all we have time for. So thank you for everyone for tuning in on today's data driven podcast. I'm Chris Detzel, and please go rate and review us. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.